Alright, welcome back to the channel. Alright, in this video we are continuing on beginner's chemistry. So we already looked at the atom, the structure of the atom and how to draw it. So in this video we are going to look at what happens if an atom loses or gains electrons. So we are looking at ions. So if an atom loses an electron or gains an electrons, it will become positively charged or negatively charged. So that is what we call an ion. Alright? So the ion is formed, as you can see here, when the atom loses or gains electrons. Now, if it loses an electron, one or more electrons, it will become positively charged. Alright? And the reason for that is once it loses an electron, it forms a positive ion, which we will call a cation. Now, when it loses electrons, it will have more protons than electrons. Electrons are positive charges, protons are positive charges and electrons are negative charges. So if it has more protons than electrons, then it will have more positive charges. So the overall charge will be positive. So cations are positive ions because more protons are present in the nucleus than electrons around it. Now, a negative ion is going to be formed, which is called an anion. And the anion, unlike your cation, it has more electrons than protons. So if you have more electrons, remember the electron is negatively charged. So if you have more electrons than protons, then the overall charge is going to be negative. So the net charge is negative. So when atoms lose electrons, they form positive ions, cations. When they gain it, they get an anion. That's a negative ion. So the main difference then between an ion and an atom, as you can see, in order to get an ion, whether it's positive or negative, it must lose or gain electrons, and that makes the amount of protons and the amount of protons and electrons present unequal. But the atom, it will not have a charge, so we say the atom is neutral because in an atom we have equal amount of protons and electrons. So it is when these two become unequal, we either get a positive ion, the cation, or a negative ion, which is the anion. So we're going to work some examples. We're going to work some examples now of both the cations and the anions. Alright, so before we work examples, we need to look at a few more things. So the reason why an atom will lose or gain electrons is because of its stability. So if an atom doesn't have the maximum amount of electrons on its valence shell, it is going to either lose electrons or gain it to achieve that stability. So when we say atoms lose or gain electrons to become stable, it is in terms of its electronic configuration. Alright? So for example now, if an atom has 1 to 3 electrons on its valence shell, that atom is going to lose those electrons. So if it has 3 electrons on its valence shell, it is going to lose the 3 of them to become stable. If it has 4 to 7 electrons on its valence shell, then it is going to gain a specific amount to reach the 8. So for example, with phosphorus, the atomic number is 15. So its electronic configuration would be 2, 8, 5. So this means that if phosphorus is 5, remember, if it has 4 to 7 electrons, it will gain the required amount of electrons to reach 8. So if phosphorus has 5 valence electrons, it will need to gain 3 more in order to have 8. Because remember now, once it has 8, it is stable. So once it's 4 to 7, they will gain electrons. So phosphorus is 5, it would gain 3 more to reach 8. If the valence electron was 6, then that atom would gain 2. For example, now magnesium now, atomic number 12, therefore the electronic configuration is 2A2. Remember, if the atom has 1 to 3 electrons on its valence shell, it is going to lose all of those electrons. So magnesium has 2 electrons on its valence shell. Therefore, if it loses the 2 electrons, then it would now become stable because its new electronic configuration would be 2, 8. And once you have 8 on the second shell or third shell, because remember, the atom becomes stable when it has the maximum number of electrons on its valence shell. So in this case, magnesium will become stable if it loses 2 electrons. So to know if an atom will form a positive ion or negative ion, you would write the electronic configuration and then determine based on that now whether it will lose or gain electrons. Right? So once it gains electron, it will become negatively charged. And if it loses, it will become positively charged. So we're going to look why it becomes negative and positively charged. Okay, so here are some examples. So again, the first one is magnesium. So before an atom forms an ion, remember we said the atom, the number of protons and the number of electrons will become equal, are equal. However, let's look at the electronic configuration first. If it has 12 electrons, then the electronic configuration would be 2, 2, 8, 2. Therefore, the valence shell, which is the final shell of the atom, right? The valence shell here, it has 2 electrons. And say if it has 1 to 3 electrons, then it is going to gain an electron. Sorry, lose electrons, and any amount of, that's the amount it is going to lose. So magnesium has 2 electrons on its valence shell, it is going to lose these 2 electrons. In the follow-up topic, we will look at where these electrons actually go. So that topic is called bonding, right? But for now, just know that whatever amount of valence electrons that is present, once it's 1 to 3, it is going to lose it. So if magnesium loses 2 electrons, right? So this is the magnesium atom, right? So this is the atom with the equal amount of protons and electrons. To get to the ion, right, it loses 2 electrons. So if it had 12 protons and 12 electrons, we did not do anything to the protons. So the number of protons stays the same as 12. However, If it loses 2 electrons, that means it will have 10 remaining. So it will have 12 protons and 10 electrons remaining. Now, if it loses the 2 electrons, its new electronic configuration would be 2,8. So you can see that if it loses the 2 electrons, it now becomes stable, right? Because at this point, it doesn't have 3 shells again, it only has 2. And that second shell has the maximum amount of electrons, which is 8. So by losing these electrons, your atom becomes stable, right? And it's no longer an atom at this point, it is now an ion, right? So, is it a positive ion or a negative ion? Let's compare the amount of protons and the amount of electrons. If you have more protons than electrons, remember this is the sign for the electron. If you have more protons than electrons, then that is a positive ion. So the positive ion is called the cation. Right? So we have more protons than electrons, so we have a cation. Now, how many more protons do we have compared to the electron? 12 protons, 10 electrons. So we have 2 more protons than electrons. If you have 10 protons and 12 electrons, the difference between 10 and 12, that is 2. So we have 2 additional protons compared to the amount of electrons. So we are comparing the amount of protons to the amount of electrons. We have 12 protons and 10 electrons. So when you compare the two of them, we only have a surplus of protons by 2. Alright? So the magnesium ion now, so you write this symbol, Mg, right? And we have protons, right? Extra protons. How many extra protons do we have? 2. So you are going to put it to the top right hand corner. And remember, protons are positive charges. So it is 2 plus. So the magnesium atom is just Mg, right? That's the symbol for magnesium. However, the magnesium ion is Mg2 plus. The 2 plus is telling you that you have 2 additional protons compared to the amount of electrons. So the 12 protons and the 10 electrons mean I have 2 additional protons compared to the amount of electrons. And if you are not seeing that, let me just do this. So 12 protons, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So remember, protons are positive charges. So we have 12 positive charges. Let's start with the atom, right? So you would also have 11 negative charges. So this is the atom of magnesium. 12 protons, so those are 12 positive charges. 12 electrons, those are 12 negative charges. To become stable, the atom of magnesium, it lost 2 electrons. So it loses 2 negative charges. Alright? Now, a negative charge will always cancel a positive charge. So this negative charge cancels this positive charge. Alright? And you do that. Continue doing that. Alright? A negative charge cancels a positive charge. Now you realize that there is no negative charge to cancel these two positive charge. So that is why we say that we have two extra protons compared to the amount of electrons. We only have 10 electrons, so they would cancel 10 of the protons. That is why we are left with two positive charges. Alright? So in the ion, you can see that the ion, when it's positive, it has more protons, which are the positive charges, compared to the electrons, which are the negative charges. Alright, so that's how you would do this one. Let's do the same principle here, apply it for chlorine. So the electronic configuration for chlorine is 2. The electronic configuration for chlorine is 2, 8, 7. And remember we said that once it reaches 4 to 7, it will gain electrons to reach 8. Now if chlorine has 7 valence electron, it will not lose, it will want to gain. And it will only need to gain 1 electron to reach 8. So if chlorine gains an electron, right? So the electron it gains, it is going on the valence shell. So if it was 287 and it gains 1 more, it is now 288 because it has 7 originally and it gained 1 more, so that is 8. So this is the new configuration now. And you can see that it has 8 electrons on its valence shell, so that is how it will become stable. So again, the atom of chlorine has equal amount of protons and electrons. But once you form the ion, let's compare. Remember, the proton number is always going to stay the same because the atom is either losing or gaining electrons. And if you look, it had 17 electrons in total. Its valence shell gained 1 electron. So now the total electrons, so remember, the atom originally consisted of 17 electrons and it gained 1 more. So now it has 18 electrons. Alright, so this is the ion now. So again, you can see that the ion, the amount of protons and electrons are not equal. If you look at the atom, they are equal. So that's the difference between the atom and the ion. Now if you compare the two of them, which one is greater? 17 protons, 18 electrons. The amount of electron is greater. Therefore, you are going to get a negative ion. That's the anion. So when the amount of electron is greater than the proton, you get an ion. When the amount of proton is greater than the electron, you get a cation. So the formula now for the chloride ion, so Cl, so you write the ion, right? How many negative charges do we have? We have 1. Now when it's 1, all you will do is put the sign. So negative 1, you just put a negative. Alright? But if it was negative 2, then you will put the 2 minus. Alright? So that's how we get the chloride ion. It's Cl minus. Alright? So let's do these two. Or you can pause the video at this point and try those two and see if you get it correct. So if you want to do that, you can pause it now because I'm going to work it. Alright, so nitrogen, it has 7 electrons. So again, protons and electrons are equal, so that's the atom. the electronic configuration, that would be 2, 5. So if it is 2, 5, then it would want to gain 3 in order to reach 8. Now, once it gains the electron, that is how we get the ion. And its electronic configuration would now be 2, 8. 5 plus the 3, that's 8. So now we have the ion. 7 protons, but now, remember we start out with 7 electrons as well, but it gained 3. So the total is 10. As you can see, 8 plus 2, that is 10. So this is the ion. So let's write this symbol. So it's an anion because it's a negative ion. So compare the protons and the electrons. The electrons are in surplus. 10 electrons, 7 protons. So we have 3 additional electrons. So we have 3 negative charges. So that is N3 minus. Alright? And for aluminum, it is 2, 8, 3. So we know it is going to lose the 3 electrons. And once it loses the 3, its new electronic configuration will be 2, 8. Let's compare now the amount of protons and the amount of electrons. The proton will stay as 13 protons, but now it's no longer 13 electrons, it is now 10 electrons. 3, it loses 3, so 3 from the 13, that is 10. And so we have the aluminum ion. Comparing now the protons and the electrons, we can see that the difference between 10 and 13 is 3. And the proton is the greater number. So we have our cation. So aluminum, Al, it has 3 extra protons, so it has 3 additional positive charges. Alright? So that is how you would get the formula of your ions when atoms are converted to ions. Now, the name of the cations and is the same as the name of the atoms. So the magnesium atom forms magnesium ion. Aluminum atom forms aluminum ions. But the name of the negative ions is not the same as the name of the negative ions. So for example, the atom chlorine it forms the chloride ion. Right? Nitrogen forms the nitride ion. So you can see that the ending is changing to ide. So nitrogen, nitride, chlorine, chloride. If it was phosphorus, so you just pronounce the first part of the name and then add ide. So phosphorus, it will not be phosphoride. I'm going to take off the ending. Phos. So phosphorus, take off that, it will become phosphide. Alright, so the ions always end in ide. So chlorine, chloride, nitrogen, nitride, phosphorus, phosphide, oxygen, oxide, right? So the negative ions, their name is not the same as the atom. But the first part of the name of the anion tells you the atom it is coming from. So if you hear chloride ion, you know it's coming from the chlorine atom. Nitride ion, it is coming from the nitrogen atom. Phosphide ion coming from the phosphorus atom. So the first part of the name for the negative ion lets you know which atom it is coming from. So the first here, first coming from phosphorus, the NITR part coming from nitrogen, and the chlor coming from chlorine. Alright? So that's it. This is how atoms are converted to ions. Based on the amount of electrons on its valence shell, it can form like 3 plus ions, 2 plus ions, or 3 minus, 2 minus, and so forth. Alright, so that's it for this video. Remember to comment, like, share, and subscribe. Alright, so that's it for this video. If you have any question, you can ask in the comment section.